All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which also improves your listening experience. Before we get started, I want to tell all of you thank you for your tremendous support. People are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which you speak. But as we always say here at Chin Check Sports Radio, we do this because we love it, as we are simply sharing our passion with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. On this latest edition, we wanted to do our review of the 20th anniversary of perhaps the greatest fight in boxing history, one of the most action-packed in boxing history, one of the hardest hitting in boxing history, and from the opening bell for two guys that went in there and stood toe-to-toe from literally the opening bell until the final bell rang. This fight, and I'm sure other fight fans have their own most action-packed fights, exciting fights, thrilling fights, whatever adjective that you want to use to describe a boxing match, this fight has all of them and then some. And we are talking about the May 2005 battle between the late Diego Chico Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo. So let's jump right into it before these guys would really put Castillo on the map to common fight fans. Besides wins against Stevie Johnson in June of 2000 and a draw in September of 2000, Jose Luis Castillo going into this fight was 52 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw. The draw against one Stevie Johnson, for a total of 59 professional fights and 46 KOs. By the way, Castillo had never ever been knocked down in a professional fight. Let that sink in. So the big fight that put him on the map was April of 2002 when he lost the WBC lightweight championship against one pretty boy Floyd Mayweather Jr., who was moving up in weight. Now, most anti-Floyd fans or anti-Floyd people will point to this fight by saying that this is the fight that Floyd Mayweather in fact lost on his record. Even though Floyd, he retired undefeated, and a big part of his aura, especially the latter part of his career, was his undefeated record. But fight fans will point to this fight by saying that in fact Floyd lost the fight and was given a gift decision. We tend to disagree with that because you are clearly just disregarding the early rounds that Floyd won. And it was a known fact in the case of Castillo, he was a slow starter, had eventually picked up the pace. So if you're scoring rounds, you still have the score of the early rounds. In December of 2002, again, this time he loses in the rematch to Floyd Mayweather by a clear unanimous decision. So no more questions, no more ifs. It was what it was, so 2 losses against Floyd Mayweather. December of 2004, a split decision against Joel Casamayor. In March of 2005, a TKO in the 10th round against Julio Diaz. And against Chico, which sets up the fight against one Diego Chico Corrales. Now, Diego Corrales, going into this fight, 39 wins, 2 losses for 41 total fights and 32 big knockouts. Chico was known as a knockout puncher. So let's go to his career and some of his notable fights. Derek Smoke Gaynor, March of 2000, a TKO in the 3rd round. And we'll even go back. October of 1999, a TKO in the 7th round against Robert Garcia. If that name sounds familiar, yes, that is a trainer of his younger brother, Mikey Garcia, and the trainer of one Brandon Bam Bam Rios. So yes, he was an active fighter and lost to the late Chico Corrales. June of 2000, a KO in the 10th round against Justin Juco. In September of 2003, a TKO in the 3rd round against Angel Manfredi. January of 2001, a TKO in the 10th round loss against Floyd Mayweather. Now, folks, this fight, Floyd was a slight betting favorite, but it was old adage, the pristine boxer versus the power puncher. And Floyd Mayweather, and as we stated before in our Floyd Mayweather reviews, and even we did a broadcast about Corrales previously in a fantasy matchup, that this fight that we think tends to get overlooked in terms of one of Floyd's masterpieces, scoring 5 knockdowns in the fight. If you go back and watch it, Floyd Sr. even tells him about the second round, Floyd, just keep doing what you're doing. By the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round, he'll be ready to go. And Floyd Sr. nailed it, and definitely a dominating performance by one Floyd Mayweather. In October of 2003, a TKO in the 6th round loss to Joel Casamayor. But not what you think. There was a horrid gash that was inside of the mouth of one Gil Corrales. And go back and watch that fight. It was almost like a piece of meat was cut from the inside of his mouth and was just hanging there. In March of 2004, a split decision victory in the rematch against one Joel Casamayor. August of 2004, believe it or not, a fight that tends to get overlooked in terms of action-packed fights. A TKO in the 10th round against Brazilian champion Acelino Popo Freitas. Folks, go back and watch this fight. Freitas was winning because Freitas was known as that very unorthodox, fast fighter, kind of get you a punch and stick and move. And when he started getting hit and was knocked down on multiple occasions, the man literally quit. I believe now he's a politician back in Brazil, but the man literally quit. But this is actually a very exciting fight that tends to get overlooked by the next fight, which is May 7th, 2005, against Jose Luis Castillo. Now, going into this fight, people knew this fight was going to be exciting because this is kind of fresh off the heels of the exciting Ward and Gaddy trilogy. So there was a feeling that these guys were definitely going to light it up, but I don't think anybody expected this level of competition. So round one, again, it was a feeler round. And by the way, why this fight was expected to be fireworks? Because you have the punching power of one Corrales, who, despite his length and his height and his reach, was known to want to trade with guys, and the Castillo, who would happily oblige, had the trademark Mexican left hook to the liver, and even walking into the fight, was walking to the ring with his idol, one Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. So in the first round, we actually gave the first round to Corrales, and here's why. We thought Corrales fought very well on the inside, which was supposed to be a strength of one Castillo, bringing in the left hooks, even though he was making a cardinal mistake of hooking with the hooker, where yes, he was landing some solid left hooks, but Castillo had a better left hook that got there harder and quicker, but we felt that Corrales did enough to win round one. Again, it was a very hotly contested round, and they literally stood, from when the bell rang, they stood toe-to-toe with each other, and we thought that Corrales did enough to win the first round. We gave the second round to one Corrales. You could score the round evenly, so that wouldn't have been a bad score, but we felt that Corrales did a little bit to win the round by landing a little bit more showier punches, but you can tell that now him standing toe-to-toe with Castillo was not going to actually take his effect. Round three, we gave round three to Castillo, again, landing harder punches. Definitely now he's now established himself because, again, he was known as a better fighter on the inside, even though Corrales was putting up a very good fight on the inside. Round four. Now, Chico knew that now I'm not going to say out of my element, but I'm kind of in this guy's wheelhouse. Let me create some distance to try to get an advantage. But again, a Chico who would say, I'm going to box, will be drawn into the heat of the passion and would definitely want to start trading. And we thought that Castillo won the fourth round by cleaner, effective punching. We gave the fifth round to Castillo. Again, we thought Castillo was definitely doing his thing. Again, win the fight on the inside. You wouldn't have been mad scoring that round as even, but we definitely gave the fifth round to one Castillo. The sixth round, Corrales clearly was winning the sixth round, but the problem is he got buzzed by an uppercut. So the question is, who do you get the round to? Where Corrales was clearly landing punches, but the one punch clearly staggered. It wasn't a one punch was round, but he clearly was affected. Again, he wasn't wobbling or anything, but it was the showier punch. Round 7, we definitely gave that round to Corrales because he buzzed Castillo with a nice uppercut left hook. Basically rinsed him, and he basically had him worked over. Round 8, we gave it to Corrales. So again, we gave round 8 to Corrales, and something he did. was he lost his mouthpiece at one point. Now, this is when Castillo was starting to come out the aggressor. And what's funny, Corrales knew that he had to come out as the aggressor, and which is what he did. But while he was getting hit towards the end of the round, he actually lost his mouthpiece. That will come into play later on. Round 9, we felt that Corrales was landing some beautiful combinations. I mean, just beautiful combos, and we felt that was enough. That was more activity than what Castillo was bringing. So, hey, folks, you have a very even fight. And again, it was a very exciting fight. But now here's where we took this fight into the stratosphere. In the 10th round, again, the fight is still competitive. Both men, so now we're getting into those championship rounds. So now here we go. In 2 minutes and 34 seconds into the second round, Jose Luis Castillo catches Corrales with a short left hook on the inside, drops him. And it was a clear knockdown. Again, it wasn't a flash knockdown where clearly Corrales was hurt. You saw, like, even when he fell down, his legs was kind of in the air and he was struggling to get up. The mouthpiece is out. So again, that's buying him more time. He's up at the count of 8. So now, of course, you got to go back to the corner. You got to rinse off the mouthpiece and you got to put it back in your mouth. Now, at this point, Castillo now senses that his opponent is weakening. And at the 2 minute and 7 second mark of the second round, the second knockdown. So at this point, you feel to yourself, you know what? The tide has completely turned for Castillo. Fighting on the inside is coming back to bite Corrales in the ass now. And at this point, that Castillo is getting ready to knock Chico out. So Chico, with the second knockdown, intentionally spits the mouthpiece out now for the second time in the round, third time in the fight. So look at the trainer, Joe Goosen. As the referee is deducting a point for intentionally spitting out the mouthpiece, because that's intentionally trying to delay the action. And literally, you saw him clearly spitting the mouthpiece out. It wasn't like that it was knocked out of his mouth. He intentionally spit it out, pulled it out. And so the referee, Tony Weeks, did an excellent job in this fight, and we'll get to the reason why in a minute. Deducts 1 point. So now you have now a 10-8 round for the first knockdown, a 10-7 round for the second knockdown, and now deducting a point has now made it a 10-6 round. So now, depending on your scorecards, either Castillo has moved completely ahead of Corrales in this fight, or maybe moved slightly ahead, because now that is a 10-8, 10-7, 10-6. That is a 4-point swing. So a huge, huge swing for one Castillo. As he's taking the mouthpiece to the corner for trainer Joe Goosen to rinse out the mouthpiece, Joe Goosen looks at Castillo. Okay, it says, you better effing get inside of him now. Which was kind of weird, because why would you need to get inside of a guy where you were being hit clean and the knockdowns resulted from you standing on the inside? So at the 135 mark, as Castillo is now going for the kill, he left himself open and gets caught with a right hand. And that right hand kind of stopped the momentum. Now, again, he wasn't as coming, because at this point, Corrales' back is against the ropes. He lands the right hand, backs him up. And even Al Bernstein noticed that, he landed a good right hand that kind of stopped Castillo in his tracks. Castillo starts backing up. He catches him, and I'm talking about Corrales, with another left hook that now backs Castillo up against the ropes. Now Castillo is still fighting. He has not given up yet. He is not, even though he's buzzed a little bit and those punches got his attention, but he's still swinging and he's still fighting. Less than a minute into the 10th round. At this point, Castillo's back is now against the ropes, and now Corrales is now pressing forward. Catches him with the right hand, freezes him. Then you see Corrales swinging for every single thing that he had. You can tell he was hitting the heavy bat, was putting everything into the punches. You see Castillo absorb all the punches, and then you see his hands go down when now he is not defending himself. And Tony Weeks steps in and immediately stops the fight, and the crowd goes nuts. And that brings the end to one of the greatest fights ever in boxing history. Now, let's break some of this stuff down. Excellent fight. Folks, this is why people still talking about this fight 20 years later. Excellent fight. Now, if you go back and watch this fight, Castillo's people never objected to the stoppage, nor did Castillo himself. Because yes, Corrales is knocked down, yes, he spit the mouthpiece out, but that's the functional equivalent of a fighter holding somebody when he gets hurt. But he was still able to defend himself. In the case of Castillo, when he was slumped against those ropes and was absorbing punches and his hands were down, he was not defending himself, Tony Wicks did an excellent job in stopping the fight. Why? As a referee, your job is to protect the fighter. And if you want to see how dangerous it is when a fighter has his hands down against the ropes, go back and look at the Ray Mercer versus the late Tommy Morrison fight and tell me how bad it looks when a fighter is against the ropes and just absorbing punches. Just go back and review that knockout. I believe that was a 5th round knockout. Now, of course, in a post-fight press conference and in subsequent interviews, obviously Castillo, being a fighting champion, said that he didn't feel it was fair. The fact that why was he given an opportunity to continue versus where the late Chico was knocked down. I understand his point of view. Not saying it's completely wrong. I get where he's coming from. But again, he was not defending himself intelligently. His hands were down against the ropes, not throwing punches. In the case of Corrales, him being knocked down, he was able to recover. That's what it was. Castillo looked like he was hurt against the ropes and again was not able to intelligently defend himself, and the referee had to stop the fight. Again, yes, great champion in Castillo, but we totally agree with the stoppage and we felt that Tony Weeks that he definitely did the right thing. So folks, go back and watch Joe Goossen again. When he stands on the ring apron and tells Castillo, you better effing get inside of him now. Take a look at the shirt that he's wearing and take a look at your screen. We just recently visited the Boxing Hall of Fame. That shirt that he wore in that fight is actually in the Boxing Hall of Fame that you see in the picture here. So let that sink in. And yes, one Diego Chico Corrales is in the Boxing Hall of Fame, so that was kind of cool. Now this fight, again, people are still talking about it till this day. Obviously, we're mostly boxing fans, and even people who use it in other sports as motivation. Remember the New York Jets coach, one Eric Mangini, used to show this fight to his football team when he was coaching the Jets as motivation about staying in a fight, about staying in a struggle. So this fight was used in even in other professional sports. Now, this fight again with Gaddy and Ward. Now, here's the difference between this fight and Gaddy and Ward. Really, in the Gaddy and Ward fight, things didn't really start picking up until the 5th round. The 9th round put into the stratosphere. Of course, with the second fight, Ward had the busted eardrum, and the third fight, Gaddy had the broken hand. So that's a combination of 3 fights all rolled into one. This fight here, from the opening bell, these guys traded until one of the greatest rounds in boxing history. So not only do you have, in totality, one of the greatest fights in boxing history, you also have one of the greatest individual rounds in boxing history, along the same lines of the Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield 1, Burt Cooper and Evander Holyfield. So this is one of the greatest rounds in boxing history for a fighter coming back from 2 knockdowns to then knock out his opponent via a referee stoppage. So again, you have the double whammy. One of the greatest, most action-packed fights in boxing history and one of the greatest rounds in boxing history. Now, of course, you want a rematch. Who wouldn't want a rematch? I think of exciting rounds of, Thomas Hearns and the late Marvin Hagler, their first round. So that's how that 10th round was. And even those 3 rounds. Now, okay, let's go back to Hagler Hearns. That fight was only 3 rounds. So, again, it was a great fight. One of the most action-packed fights in boxing history. But that fight was only 3 rounds. This fight went 10. So that's why this fight generally gets ranked up there. Now, even though Hagler and Hearns were collectively, we could say individually and collectively, bigger stars and better fighters than both of these guys, but just the 2 of them together and the magic that they made was just a more action-packed fight. Why? Mainly because of the length of the fight. So, of course, people wanted to see a rematch. And a rematch was scheduled to take place. However, Castillo decided on October 8th, 2005, that he would show up over the 135-pound limit. He didn't make weight. The fight became a non-title fight, and Castillo ended up winning the rematch by a left hook to the chin. So it was what it was. There was supposed to be a third fight, but again, Castillo came in overweight, so the third fight never happened. and Corrales continued to fight years later, and which is sad as the day that you all listen to this broadcast, 18 years ago. So on the exactly 2 years from the anniversary of that fight, the late Chico Corrales died in a motorcycle accident. May he rest in power. And it's funny, and Castillo continued fighting until 2014, until his retirement, basically became a journeyman. But it's just ironic that May 7th, 2005, which is the day that you guys are listening to this broadcast, was the date of this tremendous fight. And exactly 2 years later, he will be dead, and he's not here to witness how this fight is still revered. And rest in peace and rest in power to Chico Corrales, the late Dio Corrales, rather. And again, this fight, we definitely hope that you enjoyed the review. We definitely had to throw our 2 cents on. I know other podcasters and sports channels and boxing programs are doing their review, but of course, we would feel incomplete if we didn't do our particular review on this great fight. So until the next time, it's Chin Check Sports Radio, signing out.